Hey everyone, Marsh from Consequence here. I'm gonna get in on the fun and I'm gonna make a tier list. Um, I know this is gonna be memed, and I embrace that. I think these are fun. Please do not take anything I say 100% serious and make any guild decisions because of it. 99% of guilds take the player over the class, and this is all for fun. Also, this is not a world first tier list. I know that's a little different. This is really targeted to like guilds in like the world's 50 plus area. So I am going to kick it off with Feral Druid. They don't bring much. Their set got nerfed. Stampeding War can be taken by the other Druid classes. If you have a really good one in your guild, run it. It's fine. It's budget rogue. It's but there aren't many really insane Feral Druids left out there. So I'm gonna put this in D tier and lead it off so I kind of have some area to grow on. So moving on, we have Affliction. I'm tempted to put Affliction in C just because of the weird niche it has where it can do a lot of spread out AoE damage. The class itself is pretty weak. It could go in D, but it does bring something that other classes don't, so I'm going to put it in C. I'm going to keep in the Warlock specs, so Destro. Also, same as Affliction, it could go D, but again, I'm going to put it in C. It does Destro does Destro things, and it has a place in maybe specific parts of the raid. Demonology, I'm going to go with A, and one of the main reasons why I'm going to do this, and I might switch these later, is Demonology is one of the better range specs, and a lot of range specs in this raid are at least simming low. Now, in performance, they could be higher, but again, this is all theory. So I think Demo is going to be the Warlock spec played on the most of the fights. I think its two-piece, one legendary combo is really good. So that's where I'm going to put Demo. We can do Mages. So Arcane, actually, they're all going to go in B tier, but I think Fire is probably going to be the best. So left to right is how I think they're going to order. So Mage is weird. They're like decent. Fire Mage has cheat death. It makes them really safe to take the raid. Their damage cooldowns are pretty easy to like work around. Arcane can do some good things. Like Arcane's damage profile can be worked around. It does have some flaws. It's a little squishy. They're really CD dependent. And Frost, it always sims high, but in practice it doesn't work. So I'm gonna get baited every time I rank Frost. But Frost does some pretty insane funnel and some good AoE that's stacked. So Frost could be seen in some play. I'm gonna I can just hop around anything. So I'm gonna rate the rogue specs here. So I think sub is going to be a pretty strong spec. I think sub's tier set has some Argene to it. I'm not a rogue expert. They sim high. They're rogues are extremely safe to take the raid. Like they don't die. They're invincible. Cheat death, and all the many tools that they have, and they'll do consistent damage. Sub also brings some really good funnel. So there are some fights in this raid that will allow stuff to pop off. Sin is very consistent. I'm tempted to put Sin in B, but I'll probably leave it at the bottom of A. It's very consistent damage. It's very dot dependent, so they can kind of dot and do mechanics and be fine. So Sin is decent. DKs, my DK ranking is, I'll probably have Frost at the lower end of B at the end, and Unholy It doesn't really matter where it is in this tier, honestly. I'll just put it in between. Um, DK's value. Okay, so Frost is decent, and I know depending on Breath of Simigrosa and the fight mechanics, it can vary. If you don't have a Blood DK tank or you don't have a Blood DK option, DK DPS value will go up because of all the grip utilities that will come in this raid. If you do have a Blood DK, the priority will probably go down. I think this is fair. I'm going to roll with this. So, oh, I didn't do the other balance, or the Druid specs, or at least the DPS specs. So Balanced Druid, I'm putting in A. And the reason I'm putting in A is that Balanced Druids, I'm not sure how they're doing on Sims. I think they're doing fine. They fall into the problem where, actually put them above Warlock. They're falling into the problem where range is bad on this tier, sim-wise. However, or there's not really a problem with Balanced Druids. They bring a lot of utility, and they're really safe to take the raid. They're tanky. They have Innervate. They have Stampeding Roar. Their damage DPS profiles is pretty good. They can roll Venthyr, or they can run Night Fade, depending on what you need. They kind of have a lot of everything, and are they overpowered? Probably not, but they're definitely solid. Definitely a very solid range pick. I can do Hunters. So BM will probably be at the very top of C. Like, it's bordering B. BM is kind of a single. It used to be on early PTR a very good single target class. Just very consistent, very like straight line damage spread. It did get its tier like nerfed, so it's not as good. 100, you can still pick up a lot of mechanics. I think running one is fine. I do think there's like a clear difference between like these specs in BM. Maybe I can push it to the very bottom of B. I'll think about it. But that's where I think BM is. MM, there'll be more classes populated in B, but MM has a lot of potential, but its tier set is kind of messed up right now. Its single target sim is really bad. And it doesn't perform well on single target, but its AoE is very good, and it's like on demand target swapping is pretty good. Hunters are squishy though, so that will hurt it, as well as like their single target damage is bad. So if you don't have enough single target in your raid, MM is not going to be the class you're going to want, but it can pick up on some of the other things. And survival, this is going to be the hot take one. I'm going to put survival in A. Now, is it better than Sin? I don't know. I'm going to go Hunter bias since I'm a Hunter and put it ahead of Sin. But Survival Hunter does, in theory, a lot of damage. It's actually quite strong on PTR. The only issue with Survival Hunter, and I am a victim of this, is as a Hunter main, you don't play melee. So swapping to Survival is going to be a massive pain, and probably not worth it for your Hunters to do, because the class works, especially in AoE, works a lot different than you're used to. Single target kind of plays like BM, but it's definitely good if you have one. It's definitely a class you can roll with. I didn't do Outlaw Rogue. I think Outlaw Rogue C. It's probably higher end of C. I don't know much about the class. I know its Sim's not doing great. I believe their AoE is still AoE capped. There's other classes that do Outlaw Rogue things better. Even the other Rogue classes, like Sub, will probably do like Outlaw things better than Outlaw, arguably. And it does single target, and it does funnel, like really good funnel. So it's something to keep in track of. A Ret Paladin. So I think Ret Paladin and BM are very similar in terms of like where they are in the raid. I'd probably put Ret Paladin a little higher than BM. Maybe I can give C a little more content and do this. But Ret Paladins are fine. They have good burst. They bring a lot of utility. They kind of get outshined by a lot of the other melee, and the other melee, you know, there's limited spots for melee in theory, right? So if you have a good red paladin, take it. It's completely fine. It also benefits a lot from Wind Fury Totem, which I guess I should talk about the Shaman next. So that's something to keep in track of. So I'll talk about Shamans. Okay, this is probably the first hot take. Enhance is either going to be the very top of A or S, and I'm going to put him in S. And the reason I'm putting him in S is I think they're a raid buff at this point. And I haven't talked about warriors yet, and I'll talk about them next, but warriors and rogues are very good. And they both benefit a lot from Wind Fury Totem. Enhance, single target sim, and their performance on PTR was extremely good. So if you have an extremely good class that is buffing 4 other members of the party, it's at that point it's basically a raid buff. A single target raid buff. So now, do you take 2 enhancements? That's kind of the question. You probably could take 2 enhancements depending on your comp. They still do a lot of single target on their own. They don't really bring that much more unless they spec or they build a certain way to do like mass AoE. But I'm going to put enhance at S, and going to warriors, I'm going to put the warrior specs at S as well. In fact, they're both going to be ahead of enhance. And the reason for this is, one, I think Fury does an absolute ton on sim. I'm not positive about it, but the main thing warriors are good is rally. Rally with the conduit is actually nuts. If you think of DKs in Nathria, you could see a similar thing. I'm not 100%. I think, in Nathria, the more DKs you had, the better. Rally currently is better than some healers, healing CDs. So with that, and warriors doing a lot of damage, and if you give them enhanced shaman, they're just going to turn to the best class in the game. Now, without an enhanced shaman, I still think they're S tier, but just because of rally. But now, like with the enhanced shaman, they've just like that combo is amazing. Windwalker. I'm gonna put him at the top of C. I think they're kind of turned into a meme. I don't know that much about Windwalker monks. Their single target is pretty bad. Their AoE is very good. Other classes now have kind of caught up to them in AoE. They do bring a raid buff if you don't have a Brewmaster and Mistweaver. And I don't think they're as bad as people think. A little buff to them would go a long way. But again, a buff to any of these classes would go a long way. So definitely usable. I definitely wouldn't take 2. Probably a situational niche pick for most guilds. If you have one in your raid, it will not be a big deal at all. What am I missing? Shadow Priest. So Shadow Priest, I'm going to put it in B, and it will probably go ahead of Frost. DK, not Frost Mage. Yeah, I'll put him ahead of Frost Mage too, because I never trust Frost Mages in raid performance. So Shadow Priest, the issue with Shadow is that what it's mostly good at is single target. It can do a few other things, but they nerfed the single target. It still does good single target. It's still like top 4th or top 3rd. The problem with Shadow Priest is it doesn't bring anything else besides VE and Mass Dispel, which, situationally, Mass Dispel is really good. Definitely all guilds should have a Shadow Priest or 2 on their roster, but don't expect, in my opinion, like, other classes do other things similar and is better than Shadow Priest. An Elemental Shaman, I'll be putting in B as well, right below Shadow Priest. Ellie has a lot of potential. Always the current like sim that's kind of been going around as Ellie as number 1, but that's the build that you never move. So Ellie's kind of got a little hype around it. If you asked me a week ago, it'd probably be in C, but if you have a really good Elemental Shaman, run it. It's good. It's tanky. And it brings like a really good like ranged AoE funnel with Flame Shock type of build that sometimes that DPS spread is really good. I think I'm missing Demon Hunter. Yeah. So Demon Hunter. I'm gonna put Demon Hunter at the top of B. I'm putting Demon Hunter at the top of B. Demon Hunter is safe to take. It it might be at the lower part of A. Um, Actually, I am gonna put it in A. I'm gonna put it ahead of Sin. So I think Demon Hunter and like Survival are like semi-similar, not in like the way they do damage, but like priority in taking them. But Demon Hunter brings a debuff, and you'll probably not get that from a Vengeance Demon Hunter. Um, you will get the it does like pretty good single target with their Venthyr build. I'm not really sure how they are AoE. I don't think they're great at it anymore. But again, they bring darkness. They're safe. They're tanky. They're mobile. They can take mechanics. Um, and you'll need the debuff. So I think they'll be A, but the very, very bottom of A. And I think I just have tanks and healers left, which I'm not too good at rating, but I'll give it a shot. I think Protection Paladin is probably the best tank. Um, Kind of with Prot Paladin though is the player playing the Prot Paladin needs to know what they're doing to get the max value out of it. If that player doesn't know or the raid doesn't set them up to do it, Prot Paladin's value falls extremely quickly because it is known to be squishy and die, and a tank's number one job in Prog is not to die. So when you get up to the world first level, like their tanks are extremely good and they're not dying, and their healers are really good at working with the tanks, and they call externals, and that starts to teeter off the more and more you go down. So in theory, Prot Paladin is going to do the most damage and bring them use utility, and they shouldn't die. Keyword on shouldn't. Um, Other pretty good tanks, and these will go in A tier, are Brewmaster and Blood. And I'll put them both right here. So Brewmaster brings Mystic Touch, does a lot of single target. Brewmaster on Prog is notoriously good. They're really mobile, and they bring a lot of like niche utility with like how mobile they are. They can really help the other tank out, and they've got Ring of Peace. Blood DKs have gotten tankier over the expansion. Grip seems to be really good on this raid. AMZ from a tank is still pretty decent. And they're pretty a safe class to bring in my opinion currently, but I've been baited by Blood DKs in the past, so that's where I'll put Blood. I think I have Prot and Venge and Bear. So Bear, I'm going to put in B tier. Probably at the very top of B, actually. And Bear, once Kyrian got... If Kyrian, that old Kyrian thing was still, Bear would be arguably yes, but definitely high A. Bear is really good tank. If you have a good Bear Druid, run it. They're very tanky. It's very hard for them to die. And again, for most guilds, that is going to be king. Now, they don't bring a crazy amount of utility. Like, Roar can come from a balanced Druid. All that Druid utility can come elsewhere. But in terms of, like, pure tankiness, this dude's not going to die. He can hold the boss. You know, if you have a really good Guardian Druid, they can definitely bring them. Okay, Venge and Prot Warrior. They're going to go in C tier. I don't know too much about them. So, my guess is they're probably going to be around here. I think Venge is tankier than Prot. However, Prot brings Rally. At the world first level, maybe you'll even see a Prot Paladin or a Prot Warrior for the Rally. And they benefit a lot from Wind Fury Totem too. But for most guilds, Prot Warriors kind of fall over. They're really good at one type of tanking, and most guilds will probably not use one, but we'll see. And for Venge doesn't do a lot of damage unless it's like mass AoE. They do bring the debuff if you don't want to bring a Havoc. They're fine. Every tank is fine. Take whatever tank you want, but no tank is like absolute trash. Okay, healers. Okay, before I talk about Disc Priests, there's something that needs to be said. Most guilds do not get the full benefit out of a Disc Priest. Disc Priest is hard to play, and on top of that, your raid and the healers, the other healers in the raid, like the DPS and the raid, and the tanks need to kind of know what a Disc Priest does, and you, as a healer group, needs to incorporate the Disc's healing cooldowns with the raid, other raiders' CDs. Uh, Disc is a ramp spec. It's really good, but if your Disc is not great, you are not going to get the full benefit out of a Disc Priest, and it will actually become probably the worst healer you could take. So for majority of guilds, Disc, you'll think it's like required if you watch like top raid or top guilds raid, but it's actually not required. It is, just keep that in the back of your mind. Especially where Holy Priest is probably in the B tier. I'll move that in a second. So Holy is a good alternate. Disc also brings PI. It brings Pain Sup, which is a really good tank external. Again, things like that start mattering less the lower and lower you get. Holy Priests, I don't know where to rank it, honestly. Somewhere in here. But Holy Priest has been buffed quite a bit. It definitely has a place in raids if you want to run it. It does a lot of HPS. It's really good on Heroic Week. It does really good in like big raid sizes. And it's definitely viable. It's actually quite good. So don't feel guilted to run one. So Holy Paladin, I'm going to put at the top of A. I know they've been nerfed like crazy. They're still good. They do the best spot healing, to my knowledge. They still bring Devo Aura. They still do damage while healing. That's another thing that this does. Damage while healing, extremely important at the high end. And I think Holy Paladin is still really good. I think majority of guilds will run one Holy Paladin. It's way it covers certain events is just too strong. And now we have 3 more healers. Resto Druid, Mistweaver Monk, and Resto Shaman. I'll move him a second. So I think Resto Druid is a little better than Holy Priest. It does a ton of HPS. The issue with Resto Druid is that it doesn't do damage when it heals. And that's kind of the main reason why it gets outshined. I think it is a little better than Holy Priest though, but we'll see. Iron Bark is really good for a tank external. Guardian Spirit not so good. Little things like that will separate them. Resto Shaman, I think it's quite strong. I think you can play like a lot of Covenants and types of builds. If you do a lot of damage, you can do a lot of damage. If you can do a healing, you can do a lot of healing. Link is a pool saver. It's also really strong. I think you don't have to run a Resto Shaman, but it's definitely good and it's definitely safe. And Mistweaver Monk, I'm going to put it at the bottom of A. I think they're really good. They bring Mystic Touch. They do a lot of HPS. They do damage while healing. They do take up a melee spot, and but Mistweaver had a lot of hype, and then it got nerfed a lot, but then they realized it wasn't that big of a nerf. And Resto Druid and Mistweaver are like kind of do similar things, except Mistweaver does damage when it does healing. They heal differently as well, but that's going to be the big takeaway. The main thing to take away from the healing group is, like, this is at the higher end, you didn't want an H-Pal, you definitely want a Disc Priest, and then the other two don't matter. You can take your best players, just go with it. And this is probably my tier list. There's probably minor changes I can make in here, like maybe the Hunter and this Mage swap. I think this is actually fine. Shadow Priest does a lot single, but MM brings some other things. But this is what I'm going to roll with. I could be wrong. I like to be. It's a little fun to be wrong because you get made fun of, and I think it's funny. But this is what I'm going to go with, and that's all I got. So, peace out and good luck in the upcoming raid.